Hey, what's up, everyone? How you doing? We have Kyle Radomski here with us.
Yes, good day to everybody.
Yeah, and it's a pretty special lesson today.
Yeah.
A while ago, I mentioned in the forums I wanted to teach some famous grooves, famous licks, and we had a bunch of people in the forums giving ideas of some awesome songs. And then we were talking with Kyle, and we thought, well, why not we do more of a famous grooves from a drummer, a specific drummer? So Kyle chose Jeff Porcaro.
Yeah, you know what? I always talk a lot about. Well, I talk a lot, but I talk a lot about sort of getting into a drummer's head and sort of figuring stuff out. And Jeff Porcaro is probably one of the biggest influences on me. I came up in the late '80s, early '90s, and unfortunately, he passed away. Actually, passed away 20 years ago, almost. I think about almost exactly 20 years ago. And you know, a lot of stuff he played on was super influential to me, and you know. Everybody that ever worked with him always talked about what an incredible feel he had and ideas. Fortunately, there is a DVD out there now of a very early on sort of drum instructional DVD, which is kind of comical because he's burping through most of it more so than he's actually playing in it. But you get a real idea to see kind of the genius of what is Jeff. And you know, I was really excited because you know, he was such a huge influence on me, and still, of course, to this day he is. And so I would love to share some of these really kind of cool Jeff Porcaro-isms and things with you because I think they're really valuable if you want to get better as a player and you know, with feel and even just learning how to dissect a drummer. You know, I think that's really important for your improvement. You know, learning a song is certainly great, but I mean, if you can understand why it works or how or why those choices were made, you know, I'm sure you can relate to this.
Course,
and those of you that do recordings and stuff, if you ever get called as a session drummer, I think the thing we always kind of think about is, man, why did I decide to do that? You know, I think Callum did a lesson called "Why'd They Do That?"
Why'd they do that? Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I listen to myself all the time, playing, going, "Why'd I do that?"
Yeah.
Sometimes I go, "I'm glad I did that." Most times I'm going, "Why'd I do that?"
Yeah, of course.
So you take apart a song and you go, "Okay, well, geez, why did this work?" You know. And he was kind of fortunate too because he came through an era of singer-songwriters. And he got to work with so many great singer-songwriters, and they also let the musicians breathe a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, these days we're gridding everything and we're tying everything together, and you know, he'd actually play lots of inflections and things through a song, things that you wouldn't expect a lot of times. You know, all the great drummers have that in their repertoire as their sort of signature, and I think he had all kinds of he'd hide little things here and there that were really kind of clever. You know.
For sure. He was a big influence on a lot of drummers, and I like what you're doing here on this lesson. You're going to kind of teach some of the main grooves or some of the more popular grooves he's had, and then maybe talk about how you can make them your own and talk a little bit about what he was thinking when he was writing that stuff. You even notated the tempos in here, which is the actual tempos of the songs, in case you guys wanted to really practice them on time. And if you download the MP3s to this lesson, you'll also notice the MP3s are in the right tempos as well, just because you might as well get them at the right, right BPM. Cool. So yeah, I don't even have anything else to say. Why don't you just jump right on into the first one?
Yeah, for sure.
There. Yeah.
So the first song is it's called "I Keep Forgetting." It's by an artist named Michael McDonald, who you may have heard of. He sang for a while as the lead singer of the Doobie Brothers, sort of in their resurgence in the late '70s, early '80s. And then Michael went solo, and he did a bunch of really huge records. And this is one of those songs. The groove isn't incredibly complicated, but it is a 4-bar pattern. And that's something we don't even see anymore. Is a lot of times, I do a fair bit of stuff in the country scene, and even now, we used to do 2-bar patterns. Now a lot of stuff is 1-bar patterns. It's almost 1-bar pattern and then the fill at the end of the phrase instead of a 2-bar or 4-bar kind of idea, right? This song is very LA. It's very slick. And what I mean by LA is in the 60s through the 80s, when the golden age of recording, you had the LA sound and you had the New York sound. The New York sound's a little more gritty, a little more, New York, if you will.
Yeah.
The LA stuff was very glossy and very slick. A lot of the really popular stuff out of the 80s came out of LA. The smooth sound, the yacht rock crowd, huge hits. What do they call it now? Soft rock.
Soft pop.
If you're a drummer, soft rock is great because there's some incredibly good grooves.
Yeah.
It's easy to pass over the songs, but I mean, it's check out what they're playing. That's the whole point. Okay, so this song. One thing I'll say about this song is Jeff Porcaro had a real sort of stylistic thing where he always led with one hand, and almost all of his grooves are laden with one hand. This song's not that fast, but it's a lot of 16th notes on one hand, and the reason for that is you can play it with just the one hand on the hi-hat doing 16th notes, or you can play it with alternating hands. Totally different feels, no matter how you play it. And I think the whole thing of the way he led stuff, and again, it comes down to pocket and feel. I find for myself, if I'm playing something, I'm trying to lay it down, one limb has to be dominant because it's, okay, here's home, wherever that's going to be. If I'm doing it across the body, a linear pattern, it's a little trickier to kind of find that spot because your whole body has to lock into that. Whereas if your one hand is leading it, you can kind of go straight to that and go, okay, this is where this is going to be, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the whole idea with this first example. I'm going to kind of dissect it first before we go whole hog, as they say. So first we're going to look at just the hi-hat pattern, 16th notes. At this tempo there, 96 BPM.
I'll give you the tempo if you want.
That'd be great.
Yeah, just fill some time here for
I'll keep talking, yeah. So 16th notes, 96 is around here. But we'll see how close I am with that in a second. This isn't so bad. 4 minutes of that gets pretty stressful, though.
Yeah.
Right? Because by 4 minutes, you're like this. Right?
Especially when you have your kick and snare you have to think about, too.
Exactly. Yeah. And the thing with this tune is, I was talking about the LA Slick thing. It's a 4-bar pattern because the bass line is literally, kind of this whole chunk of the song. And the whole pattern of the groove works across this 4-bar pattern. And it does sort of change throughout the tune a little bit, but it really sticks to the same sort of format. Doom, 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 right? And it's
Gotcha.
really cool. It's like, this is like what's the other big tune from that era that was like that? Like Rapture, which
not my era, Kyle. Your era. Okay, let's get that clear. Here's 96 though, if you wanted to give it a shot.
Okay, 96. That was pretty close.
Yeah.
Okay, now, again, that whole thing, if you're playing for 4 minutes or something like that, the whole tune has to be, I called the word smooth before. That's literally it. It has to be, you have to be in control of that whole thing. So that's nice. So we got that, we got our snare drum. The example I have written here is kind of when the vocal comes in. It's the same thing off the top of the song, except it's cross stick instead of the snare drum.
Okay.
But this is basically the heart of the song, and this is what's happening through most of it. So your snare drum's playing on 2 and 4, super straightforward. It's the bass drum pattern that you got to pay attention to, okay? And if you look at it real close, it is a 4-bar pattern, but the first bar and the third bar are exactly the same, right? It's sort of like a call and answer thing. First bar, right? Second bar is an answer to that, right? And third bar, okay? And it's getting those kick drum notes and the E's and Ahs are always the hard part, right? So when we play it real slow, I'm going to take this nice and slow, and you can check it out sort of how it really sits. 1, 2, 3, 4,
I tried. Here we go again.
Now,
Very cool.
the thing, too, with this song is, if you check it out, he does change things every now and then. I didn't notate the open hi-hat because he changes it a couple times.
Yeah.
It is typically the end of a phrase, either in the second bar, third bar, or sorry, second bar, fourth bar, and it's usually on the and of 4. Same with the bass drum too. A couple of times he lays the kick drum down with the snare drum because he kind of makes more of a statement with it.
Yeah.
And then of course the last part of the phrase, the last bar, sometimes he doesn't play on the 8th note. Sometimes he plays ahead and does the 16th skip that he does previous to that. So it just depends, right? It's a little more latitude than there is in some stuff these days, which is pretty cool.
And I would say, like you were mentioning too, that the most important thing is keeping that hi-hat going throughout the whole time with that good groove. Because as soon as that falls apart, the groove falls apart.
Totally, and that's the whole thing. You know, I shouldn't do that, I guess. When you're playing along to a track, and if you're trying to get better at consistency, you have to remember that the intensity of the song has to be the same at the beginning and at a quiet volume, and the same it is at the end. You know, Steve Gadd talks about that, where it's like the end of a tune is really burning. You know, but it's how do I capture that at the beginning? You know, one of the percussionists he worked with said he used to, when he'd overdub percussion, he'd always start at the end of the song because it was burning. It was like,
really?
He'd lock in there and then he'd kind of work his way backwards. You know,
that makes sense.
So I thought that was really neat. But with this stuff, it's keeping that same sort of intensity because the tune comes off nice and, you know, kind of slinky, right? And by the end of the tune, you have to still have that same intensity. I mean, it can be up, but it can't be really kind of frantic, right? You know. Doesn't work, right? It's got to sit, right? Kind of nice and smooth, right?
Now we have this with Smart Beat Tech, and I know it's not the right tempo, but it's a little bit slower.
Yes.
Do you mind playing this a couple times with that, just so we can get the sticking?
Now this is the 12-bar one, I believe?
Yeah, 12 bars. We're going to repeat it 3 times, the 4-bar pattern, so with 80 beats per minute.
Beautiful.
All right, let's do it.
And here it comes. Cool.
Awesome.
I so much love that.
Yeah.
And, okay, now the example 2 is just a very slight variation on that. I'll talk a bit more about this in Hold the Line, because he does this in that song too. He does it actually in a lot of stuff, where he just sorts of kind of throws in these little bass note skips, you know, and it kind of adds a bit of intensity. I notated it slightly different than the record. He technically plays example 2 with the snare on all 4 quarter notes, but I wrote it out sort of as a groove if you want to kind of mess around with it. So all he's doing there is, you know, same basic idea, except we're adding a, you know, if we want to get technical, it's a 16th note triplet.
30-second note.
Sorry, 30-second. Oh, wow. So if you want to get really technical,
way more technical,
or what I like to call correct, it would be a 30-second note triplet on the bass drum. Yeah, so that's what's happening there.
Do you count, just before, and I'm sure we have people in there, do you count that at all? Because I never count 30-second note triplets.
No. It's funny, because when I was notating it, I knew what it was.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, it's just that.
Just 2 notes in between those 2 16th notes.
No, it's bad teaching.
Yeah.
It's this, play that, right? Well, no, it's exactly, it's you know, off that 16th note, it's divided equally, so that's how you know it's triplets. It's 3 notes.
Do this one super, super, super slow,
okay,
just so
sure.
we get the idea. Yeah.
Let's see how slow we can go with this. Yeah, I'll do it. 1, 2, 3.
So here's at 96 BPM, which you're probably close to there.
That's a little slow. But. Now there again, right, it's whole keeping with the smooth thing, is you want to get that in there without sort of forcing it. The whole reason that's even in the song, I think, is because I think it's about a 4-minute song. He's kind of playing the same sort of thing all the way through the tune. The dynamics aren't so much coming from the drum kit, they're coming from other things that are coming in and out of the tune, the bridge. In fact, the chorus of the song is actually kind of mellow in the way that it sits. And this is towards the end of the song. I think he's kind of jamming out a little bit. He's thinking, what can I do here to kind of spice it up a little bit? So he throws it in there. That's a really, creative thing to do when you're playing a tune, especially if you're trying to cut like a pop tune or a country tune, is find that way to take it to the next level. It doesn't even mean playing louder necessarily. The obvious thing is to go from hi to ride cymbal. Well, that's, okay, there's that. The next level is to go to the crash cymbal and ride the crash cymbal. Well, okay, but what else can I do to sort of fill in the gaps or change the intensity,
Yeah.
And that's, this is one way of doing it. You're making it more complex.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
So that's one way. I mean, that's the beauty of getting into these guys' heads, is sort of like, that's what he does. So what does Paul Lime do, or what does Eddie Bayers do, or what does, any of the great studio guys, Steve Gadd, We're pretty sure Steve Gadd's gonna do, but, Steve Gadd joke.
Yeah.
Is that funny? Probably not.
Did you guys get it?
Yeah. Steve Gadd has like, 6 favorite licks, and he'll even admit, that's what I do. Yeah, but he does it so well, who cares?
The Steve Gadd lick lesson will be very fun. Maybe I'll get
Oh, yeah, exactly. He's got to lean kind of this way when you're doing it, sort of this thing.
Tune your drums terribly, but make them sound really good.
Oh, I know. It's amazing. It demonstrates what's the expression? It's the archer, not the arrow.
There you go. Totally. Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the gear.
Do you want to do number 2 quickly with Smart Beat? We have it already ready to go.
I would love to.
Let's do it.
Now, the first 4 bars, I kind of lifted the last 16th note off the hi-hat just to sort of hear the notes in there. It's also kind of a tendency of mine. It's a personal thing that I choose to do
Reminds you
sometimes.
that you're ending the bar?
Yeah, that's probably
okay,
what
Kyle,
it is.
you're ending
1
it.
and 2 and 60. Okay, no, it's more. It kind of helps highlight what's happening there by moving something out. You guys, to go slightly off topic for a second, but Charlie Watts from the Rolling Stones has this habit of playing. He plays, let's take a basic groove. So this is how most of us would play this groove. Right? Pretty much like that. Nothing special.
Yep.
Now, this is how Charlie Watts would play it. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Why, right?
Yeah.
Well, I know why.
Yeah.
Snare drum goes from being in the groove to wah! Right there. He doesn't play super loud. So he's really leaving space to let the snare drum come out. And that's kind of a fun thing to kind of throw into stuff, to sort of open spots up and open moments up. And though Jeff Porcaro didn't necessarily do that, disclaimer, you can, because that's what you can do at home. But I love that because it, lets you kind of leave space. And also, the pattern feels different too when you start taking things like that out. It makes it more linear.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's that one. That's I Keep Forgetting by Michael McDonald. Another thing I want to say quickly is that a lot of the stuff that Jeff played on was with the same kind of group of guys, which is kind of common how they make country records to this day still. Those guys always played together. The studio players made a lot of records together. Jeff was, I think, 18 when he did his first Steely Dan record.
Really?
18.
Wow.
He was 38 when he died.
That's unfortunate.
I know,
Yeah.
and it's amazing, how much stuff. Thankfully, he left us with a ton of music to listen
Yeah.
to. But, he really, it came from right here. Sorry, from below the microphone somewhere, right here.
Yeah.
And, it really, really transcended everything. Steely Dan was like the most notoriously difficult band to work with. And yet here, this is 18-year-old kid playing on the records, And then and up until Gaucho, the record they did in '82, he was on almost all of them doing different things. Amazing, just absolutely amazing.
Cool.
Next song, speaking of those guys, that is, I was segueing. I really was going to tie that together, I swear.
Yeah.
a lot of those guys ended up forming a band called Toto. And this is where Hold the Line came from. That's one of their, I think it's on their 1977 album. I'm not exactly sure, but it's one of their earlier records. And the whole idea with this tune is, the reason I like this one is it shares with the I Keep Forgetting groove, even though it's a later tune, is the right hand push. It's all right hand. And it's like a faster, you know, I would call it a fast 12/8 blues kind of feel, right? And the other thing too that's really interesting about this tune is the way there's this sort of two feel against the triplets in the piano figure, because the piano figure, unfortunately, I don't have it loaded up right now, but da 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 da, and then when the tune kicks in, the band kind of copies that. Bow, boom, bow, 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 do 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 ga, do bow, down 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 down. So I notated that for the third example because I think it's, you know, they always say that drummers, you can always tell how great a drummer is by how good or bad their shuffle is. And Jeff Porcaro had an incredible shuffle feel.
Yeah.
And this is a great example of how he made that work. So, you know, I always talk about playing an equal, making sure all your notes are equal. And this is a great way for those of you having trouble with your shuffles. Number 3 is a good way of getting used to that because you actually go from this sort of triplet feel, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. In the middle of the phrase, though, you get this sort of, you know, we'd call it like a 2 against 3 almost.
Yeah.
Right? It's in the middle of the bar.
Yeah.
So you're kind of going back and forth in the way this phrase works. And then in the tune, it kind of moves. What's notated in example 4 is kind of the verse groove, not the chorus groove. They have very similar attributes, but not the same.
Okay.
Which is kind of what makes it work. So before we do, actually, I'm not even going to do 3 with Smart Beat. I'm just going to talk about it and explain it. So,
Sure.
So again, talking about triplet rhythm, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Right. So we do number 3 on the hi-hat. 1, 2, That's sort of the progression from the bottom to the groove.
Daniel in the chat just quickly said, are you accenting with the shoulder of your stick? And it looks like you are for the most part.
Yeah, I do. I can't help that.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
It's not wrong.
That's true. I do a lot of what they call internal dynamics, and that's a good example of that. Yeah. The way this tune sits, it's pretty downbeat centered, meaning. So the triplet feel. It's all in, you know, how you feel it, and I'm kind of changing the accents and how I'm feeling it based on the way the song goes. Right, so that's what I'm doing with the hi-hat. I'm kind of mirroring what I might be doing with the bass drum.
So you're saying basically your hands keeping the feel and the time for you is directing where you're accenting with this.
Somewhat,
bass drum.
yeah,
Gotcha.
exactly, yeah. It's in this particular case where I'm lifting a groove, I'm going to play it as it sits, and then I'm probably going to tie those things together with my accenting choices, which aren't that different than the recordings. You know, he tended to play pretty, you know, I won't say quietly, but he played at a pretty nice volume so that this stuff didn't come across sounding really haggard. It's nice and tight.
Yeah.
Right. So and that's a big thing too. I mean, a lot of times we expect the guy's wailing when he's playing these things. Well, no, he's not. He's sitting at a point where it sounds and feels good. You know, you're not trying to win the loudness contest when you're playing stuff. It's what feels and sounds the best.
Exactly.
That's bottom line, right?
For sure.
Okay, so number 4, this is, like I said, the verse groove. The tricky thing with this one is there's a lot of bass drum in it. There are ways to get around that if you're playing it at first and you're trying to get out of all the bass drum notes. The crucial things in this groove are in the second half. It's a 2-bar pattern. The second half of the second bar is sort of the 2 feel, where the 2 feels move to. You see beat 3 and 4, do, do, ka, do, right? And those 3 bass drum notes are kind of in 2s, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of the most important part. So if you're having trouble putting all these 3 bass drum notes in a row, he doesn't even do it all the time either. So it's a sort of the way the feel sits. But you hear it, you know. It's also in the way the drums are recorded back then, you know. There's an opening fill off the track that's like, right? Well, by today's toms, they sound boo, 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 boo. If you listen to the recording, though, it's like thump, 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 thump.
Yeah.
Right? So you tend to make different choices based on what you're getting out of the instrument, right? You know, the note value length of hitting a tom here is, right? Those days we were going for, not quite. Close.
Put a big pillow or blanket over top of them.
Exactly. So you're going to make different choices, you know. And so the drum kit in this tune's really muffled, you know.
Yeah.
So he's playing a lot of bass drum notes because I think it's kind of what moved the tune along. You know, now like this one's kind of a little more wide open than that, so it sounds like a lot of bass drum, you know, whole lot of bass drum. So, but working this one out slowly is getting those bass drum notes in place, right? I'm just going to play it nice and slow, no snare drum, just hi-hat and bass drum. You get a chance to hear what that sounds like. Even at the end of the phrase, when you repeat the pattern, pardon me, at the end of the second bar, when you come down to 1, that's actually still continuing that 2 feel, right? Boom,
yeah.
Boom, right? So now with the snare drum, it sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's kind of how that one sits. Up to tempo. Do you have that?
Yes, I do.
It's a little. That was probably a little slow. So.
What is it? And to get it 96?
Yes, 96 is a popular tempo in those
I guess
days.
so. Yeah. Here we go.
1, 2, 3. That one's great. I love that feel. And I'll tell you, he does some stuff with this tune at the end of the tune. I'm just going to quickly go to that. I'll do it with a smart. Oh, actually, let's do smart beat.
Yeah, it's might as well. We have it set up, so here we go.
Skipping around all over the place. There we go. This is at 80, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's be a little slower
A
than the track.
a little bit easier for some.
At a sauntering pace.
Just thought I'd throw a couple extra clicks
Cool.
in for good measure.
Your time, it was almost perfect. I was like, oh. Had me there for a second. I'm pretty easy to fool, though. So, okay, so now at the end of the tune, he starts adding these sort of double bass drum, not double bass drum, but flourishes, I guess I would call them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to play the groove a little bit, and you'll hear what I'm talking about as I add them in. It's the same idea as he did in the previous song, so obviously he wasn't very creative. He came with the same thing twice. No, that's not true.
You're telling Jeff Porcaro. You're saying Jeff.
Do you
Porcaro's
believe I just
creative.
said that?
Yeah,
It's
I know.
horrible.
Here comes the hate mail.
Oh, I tell you. Joe Porcaro's going to write me an email saying, I can't believe you just said that about my son. All right, so here is the groove. About there. it's kind of playing what's on the sheet, and then going towards what's happening later on in the song, which is again sort of just taking the same pattern and flipping it around a little bit. And that's where he's putting those little skips in.
Yeah.
Right? And it's the same kind of thing. It's not quite the same phrasing as in I Keep Forgetting, but it's the same kind of concept, adding a couple little bass drum notes in, keeping the groove pretty much the same. Same thing with the open hi-hat in this tune, too. It kind of comes and goes where he decides to put it.
So just listen a lot, I guess, too. And playing stuff like this builds that independence for you to be able to drop it out and put it in wherever you want.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of tunes that are at that tempo in this feel.
No.
I can't think of another one. I actually thought about it, like, there's a few, but this is a little bit faster. Actually, there's a Rod Stewart song that's similar. I think Jeff actually played on it, though.
Did he really?
Because it sure sounds like it.
Wouldn't doubt it. Probably is at 96.
It is. I know that for a fact.
There you go.
I had to
what
learn
was
it,
with
so.
the 70s and 80s and 90s?
I don't know, man. Well, I guess it's a good kind of a...
Lido Shuffle you got going on next is 142. So
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. This totally blows that tempo out of the water.
Yeah.
If you've been happy with 96, you're going to love 142. Lido Shuffle. Lido Shuffle is from an artist named Boz Scaggs. This was also around 1977 in an album called Silk Degrees, which is considered probably one of Jeff's best records. If you've never heard of Boz Scaggs, well, now you have. Go check out that record. It's outstanding. And you really get kind of an insight of what was coming from this guy, early on. This one and the next one tie in really nice together because of how he interprets a shuffle in this style. We all know the stories, or we've all heard the stories. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with what's called the Purdy Shuffle. There's also the Fool in the Rain Shuffle, which are all very similar to Rosanna, which is the last example.
Yeah.
They share a lot of things in common. Jeff Porcaro did freely admit that he stole.
Don't worry about that.
You're still pushing 96 over there.
I'm trying.
Oh, I tell you. It's totally...
Did I throw you off?
No,
Jeff
no,
Porcaro
I'm good. The Rosanna groove is he admitted that he borrowed it from Bernard, and that's true. He doesn't play it exactly the same as Bernard did anyways. But the Lido Shuffle, if you look at the way number 5 sits, and you look down below at 6, they're very similar. They're using the same idea. So we have a shuffle in the hi-hat, right? And of course, to refresh our memories with the way the shuffle works, in this case, we're playing that triplet feel, the skip, so the middle note's missing, right?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. I can't do that. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't do it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right?
Yeah.
So there's that note in the middle. That's what I'm trying to say, people. Note in the middle, not being played yet. So on the snare drum, we're playing that middle note in the other hand now. What this creates, instead of like with the previous tunes where it's all right hand laden, everything is right hand, now he's sort of kind of making it the two hands together. And that's what makes these next two feels work. You can practice these forever. They will never sound right unless they're working together. It sounds like an exercise until you nail that.
Yeah.
And it is not easy. It will take time. You will be frustrated, but you will love it when you get it.
Yes.
And it has to do with the accenting, it has to do with the ghost notes. You'll notice the ghost notes are all written in there. The toughest thing in these grooves to play, and again, Jeff doesn't do this every time, but if you look at example 5, second beat and fourth beat, you've got the snare drum coming down on the down beats, both of them, 2 and 4, and then immediately after that, in the middle triplet, you're playing a ghost note. Papa, right?
Yeah.
That's tough. He doesn't always do it, but if you can get that down in your repertoire, man, that is so great because it helps kind of explain the whole ghost note thing to your body, and understand why those notes live there and where they should sit volume-wise, right? So if we look at number 5 and just take the hands, go nice and slow, you'll kind of just check this out. I'm not going to play any accents. I'm just going to play the notes as they sit. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4. Kind of square, but that's the whole sort of mechanics of the feel.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, as we sort of add the ghost notes in, you'll start to hear sort of where the funk comes into in the feel. Okay.
You hear that backbeat a lot more too.
Exactly. Yeah. This tune is actually kind of I would say it's on the upper edge of its effectiveness with this feel. Any faster, there's too many notes happening at once. And you start to lose the beauty of it. So here it is with just the ghost notes, with the feel put in, but kind of around the same tempo. 2, 3, 4.
That's what I'm talking about.
That was teamwork there, folks. Let me tell you.
I had to push the button at the right time. It was tough for me to do.
You got to know the computer's lag. You have to know my lag, and then it's good.
That's what I practice every day. So you were taking that obviously way over where you needed to, but I loved it.
Yeah,
it sounded great.
It's actually kind of one of those things. I like to work, especially on a pattern like this. Like I was saying, it kind of reaches its edge of effectiveness. I push it past that, so when you get to that tempo where it sits right, it's actually a little bit easier to play.
Let's quickly do this with sheet music on screen at 80 beats per minute, just to slow it down. I think actually I might have done this one fast. I think this one's at 100 because at 80, 8-note triplets, even I want to fall asleep.
Tough one.
So let's hope this one's a little faster. Let's give it a shot.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Hey, what's up, everyone? How you doing? We have Kyle Radomski here with us.
Yes, good day to everybody.
Yeah, and it's a pretty special lesson today.
Yeah.
A while ago, I mentioned in the forums I wanted to teach some famous grooves, famous licks, and we had a bunch of people in the forums giving ideas of some awesome songs. And then we were talking with Kyle, and we thought, well, why not we do more of a famous grooves from a drummer, a specific drummer? So Kyle chose Jeff Porcaro.
Yeah, you know what? I always talk a lot about, well, I talk a lot about sort of getting into a drummer's head and sort of figuring stuff out. And Jeff Porcaro is probably one of the biggest influences on me. I came up in the, it's like, okay. Right? He changed his hands, and I was like, oh, that's awkward, It's doable.
Yeah.
So I learned it, and I played that, and I was like, it's cool, but it was tough. I was like, that seems really difficult. And I think we as drummers, we love to explore and experiment with things, and we don't know how someone played something. We just get inspired by it. So we start playing along with it. Oh, it's cool, it's great. Oh, that fill keeps handcuffing me. I don't understand why I can't play it, And it's like, okay. And I was watching a video clip of him playing the song, and I was like, oh, I think we all have that moment. It's like, oh, that's way easier.
That's what it's exactly.
You learned it one way, like, oh, I can do it, but man, that sucks.
Imagine doing that just single stroke all the way
around. It seems stupid. I don't get it,
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, well, if he can do it that way, What he was doing was he was phrasing the sticking differently, and it made way more sense. Instead of going, alternating, which is sort of like what we would all want, or probably do, right? It's
easiest for us to think about. Yeah.
Tough to go around the drums though, because your sticking changes across the drum. So you go right hand, right hand, or depending on your kit setup, that gets awkward real quick, right? So what he was doing was he was accenting, playing right, left, and the accent always fell on the left hand. It's way easier.
Totally.
Well,
there you go.
Whole new world opened up to me.
Yeah.
It's like, that's such a simple little thing, but it was like, oh, geez, because the opening fill of Rosanna is that lick. And I used to play it in a band, and I was like, man, it's like, because if I phrase it right hand, my natural inclination is to go, the fill is, right? It's a triplet. Ba ga do psh, right? So if I phrase it with my right hand, I know the left hand, which is fine, but I got to get back, you know. I can't even do it now. Yeah. And I was like, that works. Then I saw him do it and was like, okay, that's way easier.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, it's just a simple little thing, but of course in a fill too, in a pattern, you know, that's why we talk about sticking all the time. You know, like, can you play that groove? Oh yeah, cool. Well, how about the sticking? Whoa, well, gee, you know. And that's a beautiful thing about drums is you can play the same thing this way, that way, upside down, however, and underwater, whatever you want to do. But you know, the sticking changes everything. You know, playing hand to hand on the hi-hat in 16th notes, or playing, in this case, triplets phrased right, right, left, or the opposite, left, left, right.
Yeah.
You know? It makes such a difference. But if you're playing something, you have it like an intent. Like, you know what your feel is going to be, in this case, exiting the third note. Well, sure, it makes more sense to lead with the right hand all the way down the drum kit.
Yeah.
That way your sticking is now leaving your pattern static. It doesn't change, right?
Yeah.
Right? So instead of worrying about, okay, my hands flip here and then back and then flip, if you want to change stuff, it's not easy. When it's one pattern, just move that pattern around.
I think it's so funny you mentioned that because I played the Rosanna part like religiously with the single stroke. I didn't know about that for the longest time, so I totally know what you're talking about. I just want to let everybody know we only got 50 minutes left, so we're going to go through this last exercise, Rosanna, because this is one of the probably one of the ones that was requested most in the forums too. But afterwards, we're going to stick around a little bit longer because we have quite a few questions that I want to get answered. So as long as you're okay with that, Kyle, if we go a couple minutes over, you right? No?
Yeah,
I should have told you.
No, that's fine. Puts me on the spot. We're probably going to stay longer, right?
Yeah, we're probably going to go another 2 hours, and we're going to have a couple more exercises we do.
Yes.
But so let's get on with number 6 here, and then we'll take some questions afterwards.
Okay, so the famed Rosanna Shuffle. Okay, so again, if you want to hear the predecessors to this, I'm going to mention them now. Obviously, Fool in the Rain is quite similar to this. There's a slant in the hi-hats, a little bit different. If you want to check out the ones that Bernard Purdie played, there's a song called Babylon Sisters on a Steely Dan record. There's another one called Home at Last. Home at Last is the closest to this. Babylon Sisters is like a little bit of a slower version. Now, what is the Rosanna Shuffle? Well, simply explained, Bernard Purdie explains it really funny. It's actually, you get the double time and the half time and the backbeat. And it's like, well, what does that mean? What? I ordered 3 things? I want one thing, you know?
Yeah.
But it is 3 things. It really is. You know, you got a shuffle going, you got all these ghost notes happening, and it's really a halftime shuffle. Zip. Now, the reason I wrote it, it looks, for those of you that are, new to reading music, that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, yeah.
I'm sorry, my brain stopped for a second.
Okay.
So, it looks really daunting. It's like, whoa, all these 16th notes, 16th note triplets. It's like, no. It all depends on the tempo something sits at. And this is only at 86, so it's not super fast. It is quick. By the time you get it there. But the overall feel and the pulse of the tune's not that fast. It looks daunting, but it's not. I tried writing it out as 8th notes, which is not the same. And I looked at it and I went, it just looks giant then, right? So this is more accurate. It looks tough, but it's not. Remember, the amount of ink on the page doesn't have any relevance to how difficult it is. It's the tempo that does.
Totally.
Right?
So break this one down super slow, and then we'll eventually get it up to 86.
So referring back to number 5, where I showed the Lido Shuffle kind of how it's open, if you look at 5 and 6, it's exactly the same in the hands, except instead of playing the backbeat on 2 and 4, I just do the ghost note thing again, and then it shows up on, it does show on 2 and 4, but it's in 16th notes, so yes, I phrased that poorly. It's just the pattern cycles one more time before the backbeat happens, okay?
Yeah.
So I'm going to play just the hands again so you can hear it again, and then I'll add the groove in as we do. Now, the bass drum thing, as Jeff explains it, he calls it the Bo Diddley thing.
Yeah.
Boom, doom, 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 right? Well, what's the Bo Diddley thing, folks? And those of you that have been following along, it's kind of a clave, really, right?
That's all it is, yeah.
And it's cool, but Bo Diddley ripped that off and called the Bo Diddley.
Yeah.
And he changed
made it as un-Latin as he possibly could by calling it a Bo Diddley.
Yeah, he brought it to the blues. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. He brought it to the masses, and we love that, right? Okay, so here's the hands of Rosanna. That sounds interesting. Nice and slow. So again, it's just the same thing as the previous pattern, just it's stretched a little bit farther, okay? Let's go. a little slower.
I wasn't going to do it that time. At 86, it would be pretty tough. Let's do it with 80 at the actual tempo. Here we go.
Please.
I was going to say, you might also play the whole song there, but I was listening to it in my head when you were playing that.
Yeah, the bass drum part does change in the tune. It's actually a little trickier. I didn't put that on here just because I wanted to keep it kind of to the basic.
No, that's fine. This is probably the most talked about beat of Rosanna or of Jeff Porcaro anyway, right? So
it's funny actually. Again, I was talking before about the smoothness. There's a lot happening in this groove, and it's really easy. I have students that play it, and it's like, you know, it's like it has to be really, you know,
relaxed. Yeah, let's do a smart beat so people can see the notes landing where they need to be. This is at 80 beats per minute.
It's pretty close to the actual tempo.
Yeah. What did we talk about drinking and playing, Kyle? Oh my goodness. Ready to go?
Someone spoke to me there. Just saying.
Now, just to add to that, I know I'm going to get people asking why didn't you play the bass drum on that last note, because he does play it on there sometimes.
Yes.
So
I also added there's a note at the end that he sometimes plays. At the end of the phrase, do, da, do, da, do.
Yeah.
And I didn't notate that because he doesn't do it every time.
Yeah. Cool. All right. We got to get to questions because it's already 10 to 5,
awesome.
Okay? We can probably expand on this if we have a couple seconds after before we leave, but let's just get to some questions here. Starting from the very top. Daniel says, hey, how do you count the second drum pattern that have the triplet on the last note? Let me say that again. How do you count the second drum pattern that have the triplet on the last note? He's talking about the 32nd note triplet. Again, we don't really count that. I know I don't.
You can. I mean, if you slow it right down, and the whole point is, if you're trying to find out how to feel that, take it nice and slow. Okay, so if we look at number 2, let's go somewhere here, right? It's right in between, right? Okay. So you take it right down to that tempo. You can add it, call it a triplet there.
Yeah.
You know, one, and
Yeah. A triplet. Maybe.
A triplet, yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what it sounds like. That's, you know, it's like taking it under a microscope and expanding.
Yeah.
And then you see where it sits, and you see, you know, the thing you have to remember is, as it's written, it's 2 notes in between those 2 16th notes, and they're equal value to that 16th note.
Yeah.
So,
cool.
I hope that explains it.
Yeah. Daniel Gent Jones says, great lesson, guys. Thank you so much. I love the concept. Are you planning on doing a Stuart Copeland one anytime soon? Definitely not out of the question. We just got a plan for it. Find an instructor that wants to teach them Stuart Copeland.
You pretty much play a lot and rush. No, I'm sorry. That's not.
Bob2292 says, can he play Sound of Muzak from Porcupine Tree, which is an awesome song, but we won't get you to do that because it's putting you on the spot.
No.
And he says no. But if you guys have requests for us to play the songs, please do. We have a lot of, if we have time to do it, we learn the songs, and usually we do a jam before the lessons as well, and we usually get people to give requests all the time. I know I've done many on-the-spot requests that before the lesson. So Leonardo says, hey, Kyle and Sideshow Dave. Hey, look at that, Sideshow Dave.
Sideshow Dave.
Kyle, can you please explain the technique you use to play the 16th notes on the hi-hat on Keep Forgetting?
I'm glad you asked. I was thinking about that, and I forgot to mention it. There's probably been half a dozen lessons on the Moeller technique.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah. The whole idea there is, and actually I had this conversation with another drummer about another song called Funky Drummer by James Brown.
Yeah.
And it's like 7 minutes long, and it's kind of the same 16th note forever type thing. Okay. Here's one way to work on that and how I do it. It's a 16th note pattern. The nice thing with this phrasing on this one is that the downbeat is sort of accented. So I know I only have to get to... But using the Moeller technique, you know, the way you use your arm and your wrist and the whipping action, you can get those 4 notes out of that. So really, you know, the energy is coming from the first note, and then it's played through, right? I know I always plug Jerry Adolph. I mean, that's exactly what he does all the time.
Yeah.
Because if you're you know a beginner and you're still trying to work out your Moeller or whatever technique you choose to use, you don't have to use Moeller. If you try playing it like this, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Your hand's going to fall off by 4 minutes.
Yep.
Another quick thing. And I don't know, a lot of guys do this. I find myself doing it more and more now. Every drumstick has a different balance point. And if I'm playing something intricate, I tend to grab more towards the balance point of the stick to get more response out of the drumstick. If you're playing really heavy, I tend to throw them a little farther back.
Yeah.
Because I'm using more of the weight to go forward. I'm not looking for as much to come back. If I'm playing something fast, I want it to come back faster, so I'll actually choke up in the stick and get closer to the balance point so the stick is responding faster, you know? And I'm not getting in the way of that response.
Totally.
Right? If I'm holding it too far back, it's you know, there's no leverage. It's a lever, right? And you want to take advantage of that.
And Daniel posted a question shortly after that saying, are you using finger control when you kind of just talked about the techniques that you're doing for that kind of stuff?
Not really. I could probably do most of it with my wrist. Same. You know, I'm holding the stick like this, right?
Yeah.
So. I didn't even know I could do that.
There you go.
Wow.
The Kyle Radomski hand technique.
Please don't use that. Do not put my name on that.
It's too late now, Kyle.
The fist technique.
You signed a contract.
Yes. Please get my Calco to do my video.
Yeah.
The fist technique.
April Singer says, this question is for Nuno Pinto. I'm asking is if the drummer is free to do the accent like he... Sorry. I'm asking if the drummer is free to do the accent he likes or is a characteristic of a certain group.
My response to that is learn it the right way first, and then do what you want with it.
Be able to do what it is written, then expand.
Get the idea of the feel first. I mean, if that's your intention, if you're trying to learn the beat, learn the beat. If the accent falls there, that's where it needs to be. If you want to play with it and do whatever you want with it, have at it.
Cool. INR says, what independence exercise do you recommend to practice to develop this skill to play these grooves between the right foot, left foot, hi-hat, whether crossed or open-handed? I have noticed that it is better to build a foundation before going for the kill and learning the licks and grooves, etc.
Always. That's so true.
It is. But what kind of independence exercise do you recommend, or do you even have one on the top of your head?
That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I would say, all of the real, this doesn't involve crazy independence. This involves, what I call groovy independence. And that means stuff that works together. The pieces all work together. It's not like we're doing really extreme stuff where there's you're trying to do 9 with this foot and 17 with this one and that, which is really, really great, but it doesn't really work the same way. This is sort of, this is dance music. This is stuff that moves you. And I think the most important thing you can do is work on the real basic sort of coordination exercises. Go past what you need for the feel, because that's the whole thing. If you're playing at 100%, if the groove is at the maximum of your capabilities, you need to be above that before that groove really is a groove. It will not sit naturally to you until you've got to that point. How do you practice that? Well, work on exercises that use the two different parts together. The triplet stuff, man, I can't stress enough how important triplets and swing and jazz independence work really well for that. I think that's one of the best independence exercises to work on, is because of the way that the language of jazz works.
Big time.
It's all improvised, and it's now. So you need to be able to pull stuff out now. If you're working in a metal context, typically you're orchestrating things. In a lot of rock band settings, you're orchestrating parts. So you're figuring out stickings and things. When you're playing jazz, it's happening now. There is no thought process as to what sticking will I use. It has to be right there, right now.
And you have to be able to free enough and be independent enough to be able to do that when you want. And building those that skill, like just comping exercises, for example. So
a good example, syncopation. Everyone talks about that book. It's the blue Ted Reed, published by Alfred book. It's been out forever. The reason why, because it's a book of quarter notes and eighth notes in different patterns. But you can use it a million different ways. I think it's page 42, it might be 41 or 42. It's a page of excuse me, of eighths and quarters. And you can play those exercises, you can play just a basic beat and then play the pattern on the bass drum, That's from memory, but I'm pretty sure that's the first 2.5 lines. But so that's, that way. Maybe I do it with the snare drum instead. Sorry. And then when you get more advanced with it, you can take a shuffle and do the exact same thing, I actually, when I first worked on the Jeff Porcaro shuffle, I played the hand part, and then I would read different parts of the bass drum, That's beyond what the song does, so I can do that.
Yeah, I did very similar things with that one, just because my right foot could not keep up with my hands.
Yeah.
So I had to learn every little 16-note triplet where I could put my bass drum in there.
Oh, triplets are the worst for that, too, because falling on that third triplet with the bass drum is so foreign to a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
Get that.
Totally. There you go. There's a bunch of ideas for you there. And he also asked another question right after that saying, why are you twisting your hand when you're playing your hi-hats with your right hand? And I noticed that too. I think I have an idea of why, but explain.
Talking about...
When you're doing the shuffle pattern, I saw it. Da, 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 da.
It's feel. That's the only way I can explain it.
Yeah.
I used to, I've seen video footage of me when I was, 18 and as I got older and as the field got better, things like that start to come out of your playing. Yeah, I mean, it's the sound I'm looking for, and it's how I feel when I'm playing it. You know, that's a big part of drumming. You know, is making the sound come out of the drum or the instrument, and however you want to make that sound, and how that feels to me. I play that pattern so often in different ways that it's so ingrained in the way I play.
Yeah.
I can play it without doing it, but I don't know that I would like it. That's all. It's just a personal thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got a cool feel.
And it works with the molar thing too. It's just sort of a twisting action part of that. That's all it really is. It just looks more different.
It's your own personal technique.
Yeah.
Next you just have to grip it with a fist.
Yeah,
You'll
exactly.
be good. C. John 364 says, got a newbie question for you. What's the difference between a shuffle pattern and a swing pattern?
Well, good question. I would say, and there's probably a lot of different ways of answering this, but I would say shuffle pattern tends to have more of a backbeat to it. A swing pattern typically is a little more wide open. Swing referring to a particular style, which is a little bit earlier than a shuffle style, I would say, on the drum set anyways. You know, a swing pattern, if you check out my jazz basics lesson, I think I copped this one. Right, and that's, you know, ride cymbal playing a skip pattern, hi-hat 2 and 4, cross stick on 4, bass drum playing quarter notes, that sort of thing. That's a real basic sort of what I'd call a swing jazz pattern, okay? If I was to shuffle something similar to that, it'd be, you know, if someone said play a shuffle, you're going to do more of a backbeat thing with the skip in it. Typical would be like a Texas shuffle, which would tie very much into this too. So I'm playing the skip pattern all the way through, so no quarter note, no ding, ding, ding. It's... And the Texas shuffle is both hands playing the same thing, accenting the 2 and 4, right, like this. Right, there we go from swing into the Purdy.
Yeah. Cool.
Or the Porcaro, pardon me. But yeah, the terms are sometimes used the same. But a shuffle to me is something more blues-based that's got a backbeat to it, but still using probably full eighth note or triplet skip all the way through. Dot, 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 dot. That's what I would say.
Good answer. Yeah, you're right. There is a lot of ways people can interpret that, but you did a good job.
Thank you.
Steve Drummer 91 says, I request Jared Falk to do a lesson on George Callias.
So do I. I would love to see that.
Yeah, George Callias is a monster on double bass. And Steve Drummer, there is a section in there where you can request in the forums, and anybody can do this. I'm sure you might already know about it, but if you guys do have a lesson request or a specific lesson that you'd like to see an instructor do, for example, say you caught something that Kyle did that you really like, you want him to expand on that, let us know in the forums. Yeah, maybe his fist grip, whatever. But there is a forum in there where you can suggest a lesson, and we'll get that in there. We've done a lot of member-requested video lessons already. So last but not least, Drum Mom says, Dave, do you have a video that you can refer me to about how to do the 16th note technique on your hi-hats? No offense, but I'd like to see it done a little slower and learn about the wrist, motions, fingers. We have a ton of videos on that kind of stuff in the lesson archives, and because this is not a lesson devoted on that, we're not going to really talk about it too much. We have an hour to do a lesson, and there's obviously always so much to talk about in that hour, but if you really want to dive in there, look in the archives if you have an Edge membership, because we have lessons on the molar technique, which is exactly what you were kind of talking about previously. We also have lessons on finger control technique. We have lessons on practice pad lessons on developing your single stroke roll and all that. So check them out there. Email me to dave@drumeo.com if you still have problems with that. I know all of our lessons inside out, so I can really tell you where to go for specific techniques and stuff like that.
Cool.
Cool? That wasn't a question for you, but it was in there, so I thought I'd answer it.
Not really.
Are you all right with that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Hey, Kyle, thanks very much.
Thank you.
I could not have taught those Porcaro beats. Maybe I could have, but it would have took me
I think you could have.
Yeah?
You just don't have my charm.
I just don't have your charm. That's what I meant. And I can't do the fist grip yet. Thanks for sticking around a little bit later for us, everyone. We'll see you guys all who are Edge members tomorrow. And for all who are not Edge members yet, get on that, and I'll see you next Monday.
All right.